The sound of gunfire echoed through the mountains of Afghanistan as Sergeant Michael Torres crawled behind a broken concrete wall. His left leg was bleeding badly, and every movement sent sharp pain through his body. The mission had gone wrong from the start. What was supposed to be a simple patrol had turned into a deadly ambush when Taliban fighters surrounded their small unit in the remote village. Michael pressed his back against the cold stone and tried to control his breathing. 3 of his fellow soldiers were already down, and he could hear enemy voices getting closer. His radio was damaged in the explosion, and there was no way to call for backup. The nearest base was 20 miles away through dangerous mountain terrain. As he checked his ammunition, Michael realized he only had 2 magazines left. The enemy had superior numbers and knew the area better than his unit did. He thought about his family back in Texas, his mother who worried every day, his younger sister who was starting college, and Sarah, the girl he had been dating before deployment. He had planned to propose to her when he returned home, but now that seemed like an impossible dream. The voices were getting louder now. Michael could hear boots on gravel as the fighters moved between the damaged buildings. He knew they were searching for survivors, and it was only a matter of time before they found him. The village had been abandoned for months, with most buildings showing damage from previous battles. Empty windows stared down at him like dark eyes, and the smell of smoke and dust filled the air. Suddenly, a hand touched his shoulder. Michael spun around, ready to fight, but stopped when he saw a young woman in traditional Afghan clothing. She was probably in her early 20s, with dark eyes that showed both fear and determination. She put her finger to her lips, signaling for silence, then pointed toward a narrow alley between 2 buildings. The woman whispered something in broken English. "Come, I help you. They no find here." Michael hesitated for a moment. In war, trust could mean the difference between life and death, and he had learned to be suspicious of everyone. But something in her eyes told him she was genuine. She had risked her own life just by approaching him. She helped him to his feet, supporting his injured leg as they moved quietly through the shadows. The woman led him through a maze of narrow passages between buildings that he had not noticed before. She knew every corner, every hiding spot in the village. Behind them, Michael could hear the Taliban fighters calling to each other as they continued their search. They reached a small building that looked completely destroyed from the outside. But the woman led him to a hidden entrance that was covered by fallen debris. Inside, there was a small room with thick walls that had somehow survived the bombing. Medical supplies were stored in wooden boxes, and blankets were folded neatly in one corner. "My name is Amira," she said quietly as she began cleaning his wound. "I am nurse before war. I stay to help people who get hurt." Her English was limited, but Michael understood her clearly. She worked quickly and skillfully, cleaning the bullet wound and wrapping it with clean bandages. As she worked, Amira explained that she had been hiding in the village for weeks, helping anyone who needed medical care. She had seen his unit arrive and watched the ambush from her hiding place. When she saw him wounded and alone, she knew she had to help, even though it put her own life in danger. "Why do you risk this for me?" Michael asked. Amira paused for a moment, her hands still working on his bandages. "War hurt everyone," she said simply. "Afghan people, American people, all same. We all want to live, want family safe. I help because it's the right thing to do." Outside, they could hear the Taliban fighters moving through the village, searching every building. Voices echoed off the walls as they called to each other in Pashto. Michael's heart raced every time the sounds came closer to their hiding place. Amira remained calm, continuing to tend to his wounds with steady hands. She gave him water and some dried fruit from her small supply of food. "You must stay quiet until they leave," she whispered. "Tomorrow when sun come up, I show you safe way to your people." Michael nodded, grateful beyond words for her help. He had been ready to die in that village, but this brave woman had given him hope. As the hours passed, Michael learned more about Amira's story. She had been studying to become a doctor in Kabul when the war reached her family's village. Her parents were killed in a bombing, and she had nowhere else to go. Instead of fleeing to a refugee camp, she chose to stay and help anyone who needed medical care, regardless of which side they were on. "I lose everything in war," she said softly, "but I still have my hands to heal, my heart to care. This is how I fight against all the hate and killing." Michael was amazed by her courage and compassion. In the middle of all this violence and destruction, she had chosen to be a force for good. The night seemed endless as they waited in the small room. Michael dozed fitfully, his body exhausted from the day's events. Amira stayed awake, listening for any sounds that might signal danger. Several times footsteps passed close to their hiding place, but no one discovered the secret entrance. When dawn finally came, the village was quiet again. The Taliban fighters had moved on, probably assuming that any survivors had already escaped during the night. Amira carefully looked outside before signaling that it was safe to move. She had prepared a small pack with medical supplies and food for Michael's journey. "Your base is that way," she said, pointing toward the eastern mountains. "Follow the old goat path along the ridge. Stay away from Main Road. Your people patrol there in morning." She drew a simple map in the dirt showing him the safest route back to his unit. Michael looked at this remarkable woman who had saved his life. He wanted to do something for her in return, but what could he offer? He was just a soldier far from home, and she was risking everything just by helping him. "Come with me," he said. "We can protect you, get you somewhere safe." Amira shook her head sadly. "This is my home. Other people here need help too. I cannot leave them." She pressed a small piece of cloth into his hand. It was embroidered with traditional Afghan patterns and had her name written in both Pashto and English. "So you remember," she said with a small smile. Michael made it back to his base 3 days later, exhausted and dehydrated but alive. The medics immediately took him to the field hospital where they properly treated his leg wound. His commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, debriefed him about the failed mission and the loss of his squad members. When Michael told him about the Afghan woman who had saved his life, the colonel listened with interest but warned him about the dangers of trusting locals. "I understand your gratitude, soldier," Colonel Martinez said, "but we have protocols. These people switch sides depending on who offers them more money or protection. You were lucky this time, but don't let your guard down in the future." Michael nodded, but he knew the colonel was wrong about Amira. What she had done wasn't about money or politics, it was about basic human decency. The army doctors said Michael's leg would heal completely, but he needed several weeks of recovery before he could return to active duty. During those long days in the medical tent, he thought constantly about Amira. He wondered if she was still hiding in that destroyed village, still helping wounded people regardless of which side they fought for. The piece of embroidered cloth never left his pocket, and he found himself touching it whenever he felt scared or lonely. After 2 weeks, Michael was cleared for light duty. He volunteered for every mission that took him near Amira's village, hoping to see her again. But when his unit finally returned to that area, they found the village completely empty. Local intelligence reported that Taliban forces had swept through again, forcing any remaining civilians to flee to refugee camps or larger cities. Michael asked everyone he could about a young woman named Amira, who worked as a nurse, but no one had any information. The war had displaced millions of people, and tracking down one person seemed impossible. He filed official reports about her assistance, hoping the military might be able to help her if she was found. But bureaucracy moved slowly in a war zone. His deployment ended 4 months later. Michael returned to Fort Hood in Texas, where he was awarded a Purple Heart for his injuries and a Bronze Star for his actions during the ambush. At the ceremony, his family beamed with pride, but Michael felt empty inside. The medals felt meaningless when he thought about Amira, who had shown more courage than any soldier he knew, but would never receive any recognition. Civilian life was harder than Michael had expected. He had nightmares about the ambush and survivor's guilt about being the only one from his squad to make it home alive. The VA counselor said these feelings were normal for combat veterans, but Michael knew his guilt was different. He was haunted not just by the friends he had lost, but by the woman he had been unable to help in return. He tried to reconnect with Sarah, the girlfriend he had planned to propose to before deployment. She was patient and understanding about his struggles, but Michael found it difficult to open up about his experiences. How could he explain the impact that Amira had made on his life? How could he describe the way her compassion had changed his understanding of what it meant to be brave? Sarah noticed that Michael was distant and distracted. She tried to plan fun activities and romantic dates, but he always seemed to be thinking about something else. One evening, she found him looking at websites about Afghan refugees and aid organizations. "Are you thinking about going back?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "No," Michael said, closing the laptop. I'm just trying to find someone who helped me over there. I want to make sure she's okay." Sarah sat down beside him and took his hand. "Maybe you should focus on the people who are here with you now," she suggested gently. "You can't save everyone, Michael. You did your part by serving your country." But Michael couldn't let it go. He spent hours researching refugee resettlement programs, hoping to find some trace of Amira. He learned that many Afghan women who had worked with foreigners or in professional jobs were specifically targeted by the Taliban. The thought that Amira might have been hurt or killed because she had helped him made his guilt even worse. 6 months after returning home, Michael made a decision that surprised everyone who knew him. He applied for a job with an international humanitarian organization that worked with refugees from Afghanistan and other conflict zones. His military experience and language skills made him a valuable candidate, and he was soon offered a position with their resettlement program. Sarah was devastated when he told her about the job. "You're throwing away your future for someone you barely knew," she said through tears. "You can't keep living in the past, Michael. I need you to be present in our relationship, not constantly thinking about some woman from Afghanistan." Michael tried to explain that it wasn't romantic, it was about honor and debt, but Sarah didn't understand. They broke up 2 weeks before. Michael started his new job. As painful as it was, Michael knew it was for the best. He couldn't be the partner Sarah deserved while he was carrying this burden. He needed to find a way to either locate Amira or find peace with the uncertainty of her fate. His new job took him to refugee camps and resettlement centers across the United States. He interviewed Afghan families, helping them navigate the complex process of building new lives in America. Every time he met someone from Afghanistan, he asked about Amira, describing her appearance and the village where he had met her. Most people shook their heads sadly. So many people had been lost in the chaos of war. But Michael didn't give up. He created a simple database of everyone he met, tracking their home villages and family connections. Afghanistan was a country where people knew their neighbors and their neighbors' relatives. If Amira was alive and had made it to America, eventually someone would know something about her. The work was emotionally challenging, but rewarding. Michael helped families find housing, enroll their children in schools, and connect with medical care. He saw firsthand how difficult it was for refugees to start over in a completely different culture, often without speaking the language or understanding American customs. His own experience with feeling lost and displaced after returning from war helped him relate to their struggles. One day, while working at a resettlement center in Houston, Michael was interviewing a family from Kabul when the elderly father mentioned a woman who had worked as a nurse in the mountains during the war. "She was very brave," the man said in broken English. "Helped many people even when very dangerous. People say she saved American soldier one time." Michael's heart raced, but he tried to keep his voice calm. "Do you remember her name?" The old man thought for a moment, then nodded. "Amira. She come from village near Jalalabad. But this many years ago, war changed everything." Michael asked more questions, but the man didn't know what had happened to her. However, he did remember that Amira had an uncle who lived in California. For the first time in almost 2 years, Michael felt genuine hope. He had a lead, not much, but more than he had ever had before. That night, he began searching immigration and refugee databases, looking for any mention of Amira's uncle or other family members who might have made it to the United States. The search for Amira's uncle took Michael 6 months of patient detective work. Using his access to refugee databases and his connections in the humanitarian community, he slowly pieced together fragments of information. He learned that many families from Amira's region had scattered across different countries when the Taliban regained control. Some went to Pakistan, others to Iran, and a lucky few made it to Europe or America. Michael's breakthrough came through an unlikely source. While attending a conference on refugee services in Washington, D.C., he met Dr. Hassan Wardak, an Afghan-American physician who had been helping newly arrived refugees with medical issues. During a coffee break, Michael mentioned his search for Amira, and Dr. Wardak's eyes widened with recognition. "I know this family name," Dr. Wardak said excitedly. "There is a man named Omar Ahmadi who runs a small grocery store in Fremont, California. He came from that region and has been helping other refugees settle there. If anyone would know about this woman, it would be him." He wrote down Omar's contact information on a napkin and handed it to Michael with a smile. That evening, Michael called the grocery store. The conversation was awkward at first, conducted in broken English and Arabic phrases that Michael had picked up during his deployment. Omar was suspicious of why an American veteran was asking about his family, but when Michael explained how Amira had saved his life, the older man's tone changed completely. "Amira is my sister's daughter," Omar said, his voice thick with emotion. "We think she is dead for a long time. Taliban come to village after Americans leave. Many people killed or disappeared. But you say she helped you? When was this?" Michael gave him the exact date and location, describing the hidden room and Amira's medical skills. Omar was quiet for a long moment. "This give me hope," he finally said. "She always was stubborn girl, very brave. If anyone could survive, would be her, but I have no contact since 2 years ago. Last time, cousin in Pakistan say she was trying to get to Europe, but then nothing." Michael felt his hope deflating, but Omar continued. "You should come to California. I show you letters she sent to family before everything went bad. Maybe you recognize something that help us find her." Michael immediately requested time off from work and booked a flight to San Francisco. Fremont turned out to be home to one of the largest Afghan communities in America. The streets were filled with restaurants serving Afghan food, shops selling traditional clothing, and mosques where families gathered for prayers. Omar's grocery store was a community hub where people came not just to buy food, but to share news and help each other navigate their new lives. Omar was a thin man in his 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes that reminded Michael of Amira. He welcomed Michael like family, insisting that he stay for dinner and meet other community members. Over a meal of rice, lamb, and fresh bread, Omar showed Michael a worn letter written in Dari, Afghanistan's main language. "This came 2 months before Taliban take her village," Omar explained, having a younger relative translate. "She write about American soldiers coming through area, about how she help wounded people. She say war is getting worse, but she cannot leave while people need her help." The translator paused, then continued. "She also write about praying to find way to America someday, to study medicine properly and help both Afghan and American people." Michael studied a photograph that Omar had of Amira, with her family before the war. She looked younger and happier, but he could see the same determined expression in her eyes that he remembered from that frightening night in the village. "Has anyone checked with the refugee organizations in Europe?" he asked. "Maybe she made it to Germany or France." Omar shook his head sadly. "We try everything. Red Cross, United Nations, immigration offices. So many people lost in war, records not good. Unless person register properly with authorities, very hard to find them." He paused, looking at the photograph. "But you give me new hope. If she alive when you see her, maybe she's still alive now." That night, Michael stayed in Omar's small apartment above the grocery store. He couldn't sleep thinking about all the possibilities. Maybe Amira had made it to Europe, but was living under a different name for safety. Maybe she was still in Pakistan, waiting for her immigration papers to be processed. Or maybe she was somewhere in America, but hadn't connected with the official refugee community yet. The next morning, Omar introduced Michael to other Afghan families in the area. Each one had their own tragic story of loss and separation, but they were all willing to help search for Amira. They made phone calls to relatives in other cities, posted her photo on social media groups for Afghan refugees, and reached out to community leaders across the country. Dr. Amina Safi, a woman who worked with a refugee women's organization, was particularly helpful. "Many Afghan women change their names when they come to America," she explained. "Sometimes for safety, sometimes because American pronunciation is difficult. If Amira is here, she might be going by Amy or Mira or something similar." Michael spent a week in California, following every lead and meeting with dozens of Afghan families. He learned about the complex network of relatives and friends that connected Afghan communities across America and around the world. Everyone was eager to help, understanding the bonds forged by shared trauma and the importance of finding lost family members. On his last day in Fremont, Michael visited a local mosque where many Afghan refugees came for Friday prayers. The imam, a gentleman named Haji Abdul, listened to Michael's story with great interest. "This woman you describe sounds like someone my wife might know," he said thoughtfully. There is a nurse who volunteers at the clinic downtown. She came from Afghanistan 2 years ago. Very quiet, keeps to herself. We don't know much about her background. Michael's heart started racing. Could I meet her? He asked. Haji Abdul shook his head apologetically. She only comes on weekends and she is very shy around men she doesn't know. But I will ask my wife to speak with her. If it is the same person, maybe she will agree to meet you. The possibility was both exciting and terrifying. After searching for so long, Michael wasn't sure what he would say if he actually found Amira. How do you thank someone for saving your life? How do you apologize for not being able to help them in return? And what if she didn't want to be found? What if she had built a new life and didn't want reminders of the war? Michael had to return to Texas for work, but he left his contact information with everyone he had met in California. Omar promised to keep searching and to call immediately if they learned anything about the nurse at the clinic. You are a good man, Omar told him at the airport. Amira chose right person to save. Allah brought you to us for reason. Back in Houston, Michael threw himself into his work with renewed energy. Every refugee family he helped reminded him of Amira's courage and compassion. He started a small fund to help Afghan women refugees access medical training and education, thinking that maybe if he couldn't find Amira, he could at least honor her memory by helping others like her. 3 weeks after returning from California, Michael's phone rang at midnight. It was Omar calling from Fremont with excitement in his voice. We found her, he said simply. The nurse at clinic, it is Amira. She is alive, Michael. She is here in America and she remembers you. Michael's hands were shaking as he gripped the phone. After 3 years of searching, the news seemed too good to be true. Are you absolutely certain it's her? He asked Omar, his voice barely above a whisper. Omar chuckled softly. When Haji Abdul's wife described American soldier who was looking for her, Amira immediately knew it was you. She still has piece of your uniform that she used to help bandage your wound. The conversation that followed was both joyful and emotional. Omar explained that Amira had arrived in California 8 months ago, through a complicated journey that had taken her through Pakistan, Iran, and finally to Turkey before she was accepted for resettlement in the United States. She had been living quietly in Fremont, working part-time at the community clinic while studying to get her nursing credentials recognized in America. She was afraid to register with refugee organizations at first, Omar said. Taliban had put her name on list of people who helped Americans. She thought they might still be looking for her, even here in America. But when she heard you were searching for her, she realized she was safe now. Michael booked another flight to California that same week. The anticipation during the 5-hour flight was almost unbearable. He had imagined this reunion countless times. But now that it was actually happening, he felt nervous and uncertain. What if they had nothing to say to each other? What if the bond he remembered was just something he had created in his own mind during the trauma of war? Omar met him at the airport with a warm embrace. She is excited but also nervous, he warned Michael during the drive to Fremont. War changed her like it changed you. She has seen many terrible things since you last met. But her heart is still good, still strong. They went first to Omar's grocery store, where several members of the Afghan community had gathered to meet the American soldier who had been searching for their friend. Michael was overwhelmed by their hospitality and warmth. These people had lost everything, homes, careers, family members, but they were eager to celebrate this small victory of connection and survival. Amira arrived at sunset, accompanied by Dr. Safi and another Afghan woman for support. Michael recognized her immediately, despite the changes that 3 years had brought. She was thinner now, and there were lines of worry around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But her smile was the same warm expression he remembered from that terrifying night in the village. They looked at each other for a long moment, both emotional and uncertain how to begin. Then Amira stepped forward and said in much improved English, I told you that you would live to see your family again. I am happy I was right. The simple words broke the tension, and Michael found himself laughing and crying at the same time. Over dinner at Omar's apartment, they shared their stories of the years since their first meeting. Amira described her harrowing escape from Afghanistan after the Taliban returned to her village. She had hidden in the mountains for weeks before making contact with smugglers who could help her reach Pakistan. The journey had been dangerous and expensive, requiring her to sell the few valuable things her family had left her. I thought about you many times during difficult moments, she told Michael. When I was scared or wanted to give up, I remembered how you trusted me to help you. It made me feel brave when I needed to be strong." She had spent almost 2 years in a refugee camp in Pakistan, using her medical skills to help other displaced people while waiting for her immigration case to be processed. Michael told her about his own struggles after returning from Afghanistan. The nightmares, the guilt, the failed relationship with Sarah, and his desperate search to find her. "I couldn't move forward with my life knowing that you might be in danger because you helped me," he explained. "It felt like I owed you something I could never repay." Amira shook her head firmly. "You owe me nothing. In war, we help each other survive. This is what human beings do." She paused, then smiled. "But I am glad you found me. I have been alone in America, afraid to trust people or make close friends. Knowing that you cared enough to search for me makes me feel less alone in this world." The Afghan community in Fremont embraced Michael like family. Over the next few days, he attended dinners, cultural celebrations, and community meetings where he learned about the challenges facing Afghan refugees in America. Many were highly educated professionals, doctors, teachers, engineers, who struggled to get their credentials recognized and find work in their fields. Michael was particularly moved by the women's stories. Many had been professionals in Afghanistan who now worked in factories or cleaning jobs because their qualifications weren't accepted in America. Despite these setbacks, they remained determined to rebuild their lives and create opportunities for their children. Amira was working toward getting her nursing license while also volunteering at the community clinic. Her English had improved dramatically, but she still struggled with some of the bureaucratic requirements for professional certification. Michael offered to help her navigate the system, using his contacts in the humanitarian community to connect her with programs that assisted refugee healthcare workers. As they spent more time together, Michael and Amira developed a deep friendship based on mutual respect and shared understanding of trauma. They both carried invisible wounds from the war, and they found comfort in being able to talk about their experiences with someone who truly understood what they had been through. One evening, as they walked through a park in Fremont, Amira asked Michael about his romantic life. He told her honestly about his breakup with Sarah and his struggle to form close relationships since returning from war. "I think I was afraid to care too much about anyone," he admitted. "After seeing so much death and loss, it felt safer to keep people at a distance." Amira nodded knowingly. "War teaches us that everything can be taken away in one moment. But hiding from love is not really living. You cannot protect yourself from loss by refusing to care about people." Her words were simple but profound, and Michael realized she was right. He had been so focused on avoiding future pain that he had forgotten how to experience joy. Their friendship deepened over the following months. Michael made regular trips to California, and Amira began visiting him in Texas. They attended each other's important moments: when Amira passed her nursing exams, when Michael received a promotion at work. They introduced each other to their respective communities, building bridges between American veterans and Afghan refugees. Gradually, Michael realized that his feelings for Amira were becoming romantic. She was not just the woman who had saved his life. She was someone he genuinely admired and cared about. Her strength, compassion, and resilience inspired him every day. But he was afraid to risk their friendship by expressing these deeper feelings. What if she didn't feel the same way? What if a romantic relationship would complicate the pure bond they had built? Amira seemed to be struggling with similar feelings. Michael noticed the way she looked at him sometimes, the way her face lit up when he called or visited. But she also seemed hesitant, perhaps worried about cultural differences or the complications of dating someone from such a different background. The turning point came during Michael's visit to California for the Persian New Year celebration. The Afghan community had organized a large gathering with traditional music, dancing, and food. Michael watched Amira interact with families and children, seeing how naturally she cared for others and how much the community respected her. During a quiet moment, they stepped outside for fresh air. The spring evening was warm and they could hear laughter and music from the celebration inside. "I have something to tell you," Amira said softly, looking nervous. "These months knowing you again have been happiest times since I came to America. You make me feel safe to care about someone, to think about future instead of just surviving each day." Michael's heart raced as he realized she was expressing the same feelings he had been afraid to voice. "Amira, he said, taking her hands in his. "I need you to know that what I feel for you goes beyond gratitude. You're not just the woman who saved my life. You're the woman I want to spend my life with." The moment Michael spoke those words, the world seemed to shift around them. Amira's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I was so afraid you only saw me as someone from your past," she whispered. "I thought maybe I was imagining that you might care for me the way I care for you." They held each other in the garden while the sounds of celebration continued inside, both of them overwhelmed by the realization that their bond had grown into something deeper than either had dared to hope. Their relationship developed slowly and carefully. Both Michael and Amira had learned to be cautious with their hearts, and they wanted to build something solid and lasting. They talked openly about their fears, their dreams, and the practical challenges they would face as a couple from such different backgrounds. Amira was concerned about how Michael's family would accept her. Although she had adapted well to American culture, she still maintained many Afghan traditions and values. She worried that his family might see her as foreign or different. Michael assured her that his family would love her, but he understood her concerns. Cultural differences in relationships could create unexpected challenges. Michael had his own worries about whether he could truly understand Amira's experiences as a refugee and immigrant. He had seen war, but she had lost her entire world. He wanted to be supportive without being overprotective, to respect her independence while showing how much he cared for her. They decided to take things one step at a time. Michael began learning Dari, Amira's native language, so he could better communicate with her Afghan friends and understand her cultural background. Amira helped him learn about Afghan history, traditions, and customs. They both found these cultural exchanges enriching and eye-opening. When Michael finally brought Amira to Texas to meet his family, his mother immediately embraced her. "Any woman brave enough to save my son's life is a daughter to me," she declared, pulling Amira into a warm hug. His sister was equally welcoming, fascinated by Amira's stories and impressed by her strength and intelligence. Michael's father, a Vietnam veteran himself, connected with Amira's understanding of how war changes people. "You've both seen things that most folks can't imagine," he told them over dinner. "That shared understanding is a gift. Don't take it for granted." His acceptance meant everything to Michael, who had worried that his family might not understand his choice to date someone so different from his previous girlfriends. In California, the Afghan community watched Michael and Amira's relationship develop with great interest and approval. Omar had become like a father figure to Amira, and he thoroughly approved of Michael. "This man searched for you when he had no reason to," he reminded her. "That shows the kind of heart he has. You will be happy together." Dr. Safi and other women in the community offered Amira advice about navigating an intercultural relationship. They shared their own experiences of marrying outside their culture or adapting to American relationship customs. Their support gave Amira confidence and helped her feel less alone in facing these new challenges. After 8 months of dating, Michael and Amira began discussing marriage seriously. They both wanted a life together, but they also wanted to honor both of their backgrounds and families. Planning a wedding that would respect both American and Afghan traditions seemed complicated, but they were determined to find a way. Amira's biggest regret was that her parents weren't alive to meet Michael and give their blessing to the marriage. In Afghan culture, family approval was extremely important, and she felt the absence of her parents deeply. Omar stepped in to fill this role, but it wasn't quite the same as having her father's permission and her mother's guidance. Michael proposed on the anniversary of the day they first met in Afghanistan. He had planned an elaborate surprise, but in the end he simply asked her while they were sitting in the same park where they had first admitted their feelings for each other. He presented her with a ring that incorporated both a traditional diamond and a small stone from Afghanistan that Omar had given him as a symbol of their family's acceptance. "I know we started our story in a terrible place," Michael said as he knelt before her. "But you turned the worst day of my life into the beginning of the best thing that ever happened to me. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you've made me?" Amira said yes through tears of joy. She had never imagined that her decision to help a wounded soldier would lead to finding the love of her life. The engagement was celebrated by both their communities, with parties in both California and Texas that brought together people from completely different worlds united by their love for the couple. Planning the wedding became a beautiful collaboration between cultures. They decided to have two ceremonies, a traditional American wedding that Michael's family could fully participate in, and an Afghan celebration that would honor Amira's heritage. The preparations took months and involved both communities working together to create something special. Amira found a beautiful wedding dress that combined Western and Afghan elements. The bodice was traditional white satin, but the skirt incorporated intricate embroidery and patterns similar to traditional Afghan clothing. Michael wore his military dress uniform for the American ceremony and traditional Afghan clothing for the cultural celebration. The American ceremony was held in a small church in Michael's hometown in Texas. His military friends served as groomsmen, while Amira chose Dr. Safi and several other Afghan women as her bridesmaids. The ceremony was conducted in English, but Omar gave a blessing in Dari that brought tears to everyone's eyes, even those who couldn't understand the words. What made the moment even more special was the presence of other veterans and refugee families who had become part of their extended community. Michael's former commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, attended the wedding and personally apologized to Amira for his earlier skepticism about trusting locals during the war. "You proved me wrong," he told her. "Your courage saved one of my best soldiers." During the American reception, Michael's army buddies shared stories about his desperate search for Amira after returning from Afghanistan. They revealed how he had talked about her constantly, driving them crazy with his determination to find her. "We thought he was crazy," one friend joked during his speech, "but now we see that crazy love sometimes leads to the most beautiful endings." The Afghan celebration was held the following weekend in Fremont, transforming the community center into a magnificent display of Afghan culture. Traditional musicians played instruments that most of the American guests had never seen before, and the air was filled with the aromas of authentic Afghan cuisine prepared by dozens of community members. Amira looked radiant in a traditional red and gold Afghan wedding dress that had been specially made by women in the community. Michael had learned enough Dari by now to recite his vows in her native language, causing the Afghan guests to cheer with approval and joy. The ceremony followed ancient customs that connected the couple not just to each other, but to generations of tradition and family history. During the Afghan reception, the celebration included traditional dances and ceremonies that told the story of marriage and commitment in Afghan culture. Michael's family participated enthusiastically, despite not understanding all the customs. His mother and sister learned traditional women's dances, and his father joined the men in ceremonial toasts and blessings. The most emotional moment came when the elderly women in the community presented Amira with jewelry and family heirlooms, symbolically adopting her as their daughter since her own mother couldn't be there. "You are not alone," they told her in Dari. "We are your family now, and Michael is our son too." As the celebrations continued late into the night, Michael and Amira found a quiet moment together on a balcony overlooking the festivities. They could see their two communities mingling below, Texas cowboys learning Afghan dances, elderly Afghan men sharing war stories with American veterans, children from both cultures playing together without any awareness of the differences that sometimes divided adults. "Do you think we're crazy for believing this can work?" Amira asked, leaning against Michael's shoulder. He thought about everything they had overcome to reach this moment: war, separation, cultural differences, and their own fears about love and trust. "Maybe we are a little crazy," he admitted. "But crazy love brought us together in the first place. You risked your life to save a stranger, and I spent 3 years searching the world to find you. If that's not crazy, I don't know what is." He kissed her forehead gently. "But it's the best kind of crazy there is." The wedding gifts from both communities reflected the unique nature of their union. Michael's military friends gave them practical items for their new home, while the Afghan community presented them with beautiful handmade carpets, traditional serving pieces, and artwork that would help them remember their cultural heritage. One gift particularly moved them both. Omar presented them with a framed piece of embroidered cloth, the same pattern as the small piece Amira had given Michael in the village years ago. "This was made by your grandmother," he told Amira. "She started it before the war, and I finished it in her memory. Now it will bless your new home and remind you that love survives even when everything else is destroyed." As their honeymoon approached, Michael and Amira decided to take an unconventional trip. Instead of going to a tropical resort or European city, they chose to spend 2 weeks volunteering at a refugee camp in Jordan, working with families who were still waiting for resettlement opportunities. It seemed fitting that they would begin their married life by helping others who were experiencing the same displacement and uncertainty that had once defined Amira's existence. The work was emotionally challenging but deeply meaningful. They helped families navigate bureaucratic processes, provided medical care to children and elderly refugees, and simply offered hope to people who had lost everything. Seeing their love story gave many refugees hope that their own suffering might eventually lead to something beautiful. On their last night at the camp, an elderly Syrian woman approached them with tears in her eyes. "Seeing you two together gives me faith that my own children will find happiness again someday," she said through a translator. "You show us that love can grow even in the soil of war and loss." Flying back to America as husband and wife, Michael and Amira knew that their real adventure was just beginning. They had decided to settle in California, where Michael would continue his work with refugee services, and Amira would practice nursing while also developing programs to help other Afghan women refugees access health care and education. Their first home was a modest apartment in Fremont, close to the Afghan community that had become their extended family. They decorated it with gifts from their wedding, Afghan carpets and American furniture, photos from both Texas and Afghanistan, books in multiple languages that reflected their shared interests and different backgrounds. The transition to married life had its challenges. They occasionally misunderstood each other due to cultural differences or language barriers. Sometimes Michael's protective instincts clashed with Amira's fierce independence. Sometimes Amira's traditional values conflicted with American customs that Michael took for granted. But they approached these challenges the same way they had approached everything else in their relationship, with patience, communication, and deep respect for each other's perspectives. They learned that love wasn't just about the dramatic moment of saving someone's life or the romantic gesture of searching across continents. Real love was in the daily choice to understand, support, and cherish each other through all of life's ordinary and extraordinary moments. 2 years into their marriage, Michael and Amira had built a beautiful life together that exceeded both of their dreams. Amira had successfully obtained her nursing license and was working at a major hospital in San Francisco, where her skills and compassion made her beloved by both colleagues and patients. Michael had been promoted to regional director for refugee services, overseeing programs that helped thousands of displaced families across the western United States. Their apartment had become a gathering place for their diverse community of friends. Every month they hosted dinner parties that brought together Afghan refugees, American veterans, humanitarian workers, and neighbors from every background imaginable. These gatherings often lasted late into the night, filled with stories, laughter, and the kind of deep conversations that form lasting friendships. Amira had also started a nonprofit organization called Healing Bridges that specifically helped Afghan women refugees access medical training and education. The program had already helped dozens of women become certified nursing assistants, medical translators, and healthcare advocates. Michael used his connections to secure funding and partnerships with hospitals and medical schools. The success of Healing Bridges caught the attention of national media, and Michael and Amira were invited to speak at conferences and universities about their work. They always told their story together, how a moment of compassion during war had grown into a partnership that was now helping hundreds of other people build new lives. During one particularly memorable speaking engagement at Stanford University, a young student asked Amira what advice she would give to refugees who felt hopeless about their future in America. Amira thought for a moment, then said, "I learned that sometimes the worst day of your life can become the first day of your best life, but only if you choose to help others, even when you are afraid, even when you have very little to give." Their personal happiness was made complete when Amira discovered she was pregnant. The news came as a surprise. They had been so focused on their work and their community that they hadn't been actively trying to start a family. But the joy they felt was overwhelming. They would finally have the chance to create the family that war had taken from both of them. Michael was nervous about becoming a father, worried that his own experiences with trauma might affect his ability to raise a child. Amira reassured him that their child would be lucky to have a father who understood both the darkness and light that existed in the world.
"You will teach our baby about courage and compassion," she told him.
These are the most important lessons any parent can give. The pregnancy brought their two families even closer together. Michael's mother flew to California to help prepare for the baby, working alongside the Afghan women in the community to create a nursery that reflected both cultures. They decorated the room with American quilts and Afghan tapestries, children's books in multiple languages, and toys that would help their child appreciate the richness of their diverse heritage. Omar was particularly excited about becoming a great uncle figure to the baby. He had never had children of his own, and Amira had become like a daughter to him. He spent weeks carving a traditional Afghan cradle from walnut wood, incorporating symbols that would protect the child and bring good fortune to the family. As Amira's due date approached, they received unexpected news that would make their joy even more complete. Dr. Wardak, the physician who had helped Michael find Omar years earlier, called with exciting information. Through his network of contacts, he had located Amira's cousin Fatima, who had been living in Germany as a refugee for the past 4 years. Fatima was the only surviving member of Amira's immediate family, and they had lost contact during the chaos of fleeing Afghanistan. The emotional phone call between the cousins was conducted in rapid Dari, with both women crying and laughing as they caught up on years of separation. Fatima immediately began making plans to visit California for the birth of Amira's baby. The reunion between Amira and Fatima was deeply moving for everyone who witnessed it. They looked remarkably similar, and seeing them together reminded the community of all the families that had been torn apart by war. Fatima brought with her a small suitcase of family photographs and mementos that she had managed to save during their escape from Afghanistan. Among these treasures was Amira's mother's jewelry and a handwritten book of family recipes that had been passed down through generations. "I saved these hoping that someday I would find you again," Fatima explained through tears. "Now your daughter will know about her grandmother's cooking and her great-grandmother's stories." When Amira went into labor, she was surrounded by more love and support than she had ever imagined possible. Michael held her hand throughout the long night, whispering encouragements in both English and Dari. The waiting room was filled with their chosen family, Omar, Dr. Safi, Fatima, Michael's parents who had flown in from Texas, and dozens of friends from both communities. Their daughter was born at sunrise on a beautiful spring morning, healthy and perfect in every way. They named her Layla Sophia Torres Amadi, Layla meaning night in Arabic, representing the darkness from which their love had emerged, and Sophia meaning wisdom in Greek, representing their hope that she would grow up understanding the value of compassion and courage. The hospital room was filled with flowers, gifts, and visitors from around the world. Cards arrived from refugee families they had helped, veterans Michael had served with, and humanitarian workers who had been inspired by their story. The local Afghan community organized a celebration that lasted for days, with women taking turns, cooking meals for the new parents and offering traditional blessings for the baby. Michael looked down at his daughter sleeping in his arms and felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. If someone had told him during that terrifying night in Afghanistan that the woman who saved his life would become his wife and the mother of his children, he would never have believed it. Amira watched her husband cradle their daughter and thought about all the people who had played a role in bringing them to this point. Her parents, who had taught her to value education and compassion. Omar, who had provided family and stability when she had nothing. The American soldiers who had fought to protect people like her. The refugee workers who had helped her build a new life. Every person who had chosen kindness over fear had contributed to this moment. As they prepared to take Layla home from the hospital, Michael and Amira talked about the stories they would tell their daughter about her heritage. They would tell her about her grandmother in Afghanistan who had been a teacher, and her grandfather in Texas who had served his country with honor. They would tell her about the night her parents met during the darkest moment of their lives, and how love had grown from an act of simple human kindness. Most importantly, they would teach her that being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means choosing to help others even when you are scared. They would tell her that home isn't a place you're born, but rather the place where you choose to build love with people who accept and support you. Looking back on their journey, Michael and Amira knew that their story was both unique and universal. Every refugee carried similar stories of loss and hope, Every veteran struggled with the transition from war to peace. Every person who had experienced trauma faced the challenge of learning to trust and love again. But their story also proved that healing was possible, that love could bridge any divide, and that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings emerged from the darkest endings. They had found each other in a moment of crisis, lost each other in the chaos of war, and found each other again through determination and faith. Now they had the rest of their lives to write new chapters together, raising their daughter, helping other refugees and veterans, and proving every day that hope and love could triumph over fear and hatred. Their love story had begun with Amira saving Michael's life, but in the end they had saved each other in every way that truly mattered. As they drove home from the hospital with their newborn daughter, Michael reached over and took Amira's hand. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything, for saving my life, for loving me, for giving me a family and a purpose I never knew I needed." Amira squeezed his hand and smiled. "Thank you for finding me," she replied, "for never giving up, for bringing me home to a family I never expected to have." She looked back at their sleeping daughter and added, "And thank you for showing me that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of something even more beautiful."